Okay, guys, you see back behind me my depression and anxiety grid that you're probably well familiar with by now. And today what I wanted to talk to you about is whether it's time for you to get off of your antidepressants or your anti-anxiety medications, those SSRIs, the Wellbutrin, those kinds of medication. And I will have patients that will take themselves off of these things, and hopefully they do well. I have patients who come to me and they ask me, hey, I didn't know if I should have gotten off of these kinds of things, and I wanted to know what to do, and they had this deep kind of fear about what was going to be waiting for them when they got off. And so I want to try and help both groups of people, those that have rushed into a decision without thinking about it enough, and those that are approaching this with way too much fear, because we can look at this from a logical standpoint and maybe come up with a good conclusion. And if we don't come up with the conclusion that we want, we can maybe address it before we've caused any problems. And so I'm going to show you that. So let's say you're on an antidepressant or you're on an anti-anxiety medicine trying to prevent these kinds of things, and you're feeling pretty good wanting to get off of this medicine. Let's say you've gone without feeling too depressed for the last 6 months, or without having an anxiety attack for the last 3 months, and you think, maybe I can get off of this medication. Maybe I'm doing well enough. Is this the right time? How do you find that out? Well, the way that I challenge my patients to come up with that answer is an assignment that I call the 3-chapter exercise. And yes, I can count to 3. What the 3-chapter exercise is I ask the patients to get a bound notebook. I honestly think that the information that they come up with in this exercise is going to be something that they refer back to year after year after year if ever they need to deal with any issues of depression. And so what I ask them to do is get a bound notebook. They're about $10 at Staples, and start writing what I call the 3-chapter exercise. And the 3 chapters are this. You only have to write 2 pages, 3 pages, whatever you feel you need to do in order to describe accurately the information that I'm asking for. But chapter number 1, I'd like you to write about what was life like for you before you had any of these antidepressants, anti-anxiety medicines, before the Prozac, before the Lexapro, whatever it is that you're taking. Surely you had a lot of problems that caused you to get on these things. Were those problems that you were constantly feeling fear? Were those fears about something specific, or were you just generally feeling fear about everything? Were you feeling completely overwhelmed by things and couldn't get out of bed? Or was it that you couldn't do the things that you needed? Did you have terrible insomnia and you couldn't go to sleep until 3 o'clock in the morning, and then couldn't get up until 12 o'clock in the afternoon? What kinds of things were your symptoms? Also, in this first of the 3 chapters, I would like you to write about what did you try and do to overcome this before you had medication. Maybe you tried to do more fun things. Maybe you started drinking a little bit. Maybe you started smoking marijuana. I don't know what you did, but you're going to want to write what life was like whenever you tried those things and how well they worked. This typically tends to show negative results. The patients will write down all of those kinds of things, and looking back can very often give the patient a good positive feeling about all of those kinds of things that they've overcome. And that brings us into chapter 2. Now, chapter 2 is going to be a chapter about what life is like now that you're doing so well. Clearly, you're doing well because you're thinking about getting off of the medication. Now, if you're having a whole bunch of side effects from the medication, and that's why you want to get off of this, we don't have to go through all of the rigmarole of the 3-chapter exercise, because we want to quickly get on to something else that's going to help you as much and to hopefully avoid the side effects. So skip this if you are looking at it from that standpoint, but think about it if you are doing well with your antidepressant or anti-anxiety medicine, because you're going to want to write in this second chapter about what life is like on this medication. Some of the things are better than they were before, simply automatically. If your issue with energy was whenever you'd wake up in the morning you had 0 energy, maybe now you wake up with that full energy and it does so automatically. Maybe it doesn't do so automatically. If that's the case, you definitely want to write about that. Maybe you wake up and you still have the same low energy that you used to have before you were on this medication, but now you've learned that you're always going to do 10 jumping jacks whenever you first get out of bed, or you're going to run on the elliptical machine. Write down those kinds of things, because if you've taken steps to overcome this that did not involve the medication, Those tools are going to be a great asset to you whenever we finally get off of this medication. So write down all the things that you did in order to overcome these things and how well they worked. Some of these things have gotten better almost automatically, and that's a tremendous thing to write down as well. Make sure and list both of those. If there are any negative things that are still remaining in Chapter 2, feel free and write about those, but make sure you write down what you plan to try and do to get those to be better. Now that brings us to Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is a chapter where you're going to write a couple of pages speculating on what life is going to be like once you finally get off of these medications. So we can presume that any problems that you listed in Chapter 1 are going to happen again in Chapter 3, and you better be ready to deal with those. So write down the kinds of things that you plan to do to overcome any problems. Take a look at any of the problems that you listed in Chapter 2 that have gotten better. All of those problems that got better easily, you have to assume that that was the medication that made those problems like insomnia go away so rapidly, and you may be forced to try and deal with insomnia again. How do you plan to do it if we don't have that medication involved? Making all of these plans ahead of time lets you know how much you've done to overcome these things. Some of the things that have improved about you over the last months to years while you've been on the medication, things that led you to overcome the depression, to overcome the anxiety, some of those things have gotten better because of the medication. But some of those things have gotten better because you've been practicing, because you've been working on you. And those are the kinds of things that are going to be rewarded whenever you finally get off of this medication, because those skills are going to be the thing that gave you the building blocks. Now, hopefully during the time that you've been on the medication, that those have been setting the stage so that you build more and more building blocks so that you can overcome things on your own. And the more skills that you have developed during that time, the more likely you are to be successful whenever you finally get off of these medications. So if you've gone through all of these things and it looks like you're going to be able to have strategy to overcome those kinds of stresses, those kinds of problems that you had in Chapter 1, you might be in a good position to get off of this. Doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Some medications have withdrawal syndromes that go with it. So make sure and talk to your doctor about those possible withdrawal symptoms and what you plan to do about them if you encounter them. I'm sure they've got solutions for it, like tapering the medication down. But thinking about it ahead of time is the best way that you don't get surprised and you don't run into the problems that you don't need to. Good luck.